welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. This is Jessica. I am really excited to be here with, is it Peg Tyre?
Tyre, yes, like the wheel.
Like the wheel.
Right.
Peg Tyre, author of Strangers in the Night, which actually, how many years has it been since the book was originally released?
27 years since it was released.
27 years, and the book is being re-released 27 years later. Welcome, first of all. I'm really excited to have you here. I find it really interesting. First of all, what is your background, just for our listeners who might not know?
So I have spent 30 years as a career journalist, covering crime, organized crime, domestic terrorism, law enforcement, courts, cops. And then I moved to cover education, and I wrote a book about domestic terrorism, and then I moved to cover education when I was a cover story writer at Newsweek, and then became sort of known for that. But in the 90s, I had written two delicious romantic urban crime thrillers, and these are being reprinted.
So first of all, congratulations on the reprinting. I find it really interesting that everything just sort of came full circle. So you were really in the very beginning of your journalism career when you wrote fiction. So first of all, this is the story of somebody named Kate Murray, who she is sort of at the center of this crime story. She had a bit of a slip up in the past, trying to reprove herself, and she finds herself in this crazy dance of a triangle between two gentlemen who are either drawn to her, she's drawn to them, that may or may not be able to help her solve another crime. I guess one of my questions is, like I said before, so you were just at the very beginning of your journalism career when you wrote this book. How did that sort of inform you writing fiction? And why do you think that 27 years later, this was the time to sort of re-release this book?
Well, I wrote the book when I was a field reporter covering homicides in New York City. So we had 2,000 homicides a year, so it was 9 a day. And I would go into police headquarters and try and find the crime that was going to lead the news story for the next day. And then I would go out and talk to people who were on the scene, and police and victims and community members, try and figure out what happened. And that was what I did every day for years. And it was really amazing. It was an incredible education. I am so grateful to all the people that I talked to and who agreed to talk to me over those years. But it was kind of traumatic in a way. It was a lot of mayhem. And I think I wrote these books to sort of process what was going on and to try and put them in a kind of narrative so that I didn't go crazy. Because, well, we talk a lot about PTSD and that sort of thing now, but we weren't really talking about it back in the day. And I definitely was experiencing a lot of really chaotic, jolting stuff. So I tried to capture that, and also tried to capture what it was like to be working as a woman in a very, very sexist, male-dominated environment. And the super rugged atmosphere that, I don't think women are going to put up with any longer. During the Me Too movement, I had kind of a surprise when I was like, wow, like that was part of my job description, and now women are saying they're not going to take it anymore. Like, right on for our younger women. Like, good for you guys. So I think that era has passed, thank God. But it was a little bit of processing, I think, is what I was doing. And also, I was amazed and I was thrilled, and it was in some ways so fascinating and so joyous to be able to, I don't know, joyous is the wrong word, but it was so Yeah, I felt like it was so mission driven to be able to bring the stories of people who were really being victimized in the crack epidemic to the general public. I remember once going from a crime scene in Bushwick to the Blue Room in City Hall and raising my hand to the mayor and saying, "Can you honestly say that you're a tough on crime mayor?" Because I just come from like a Colombian drug massacre, and so it really felt like I was able to speak truth to power in a way that was very heady for me at the time.
So when you went, so this book, was it edited at all from the original version, or is it just a complete reissue?
It's a reissue. Jeremy Wagner runs Dead Sky Publishing, and my husband is also a novelist and a television writer. And they got to be good friends. And Jeremy ended up reading my books. I said, by the way, these books sitting around, which I'm like, people don't really know me for them, but I'm proud of them. I think they're great, and they really are a time capsule. It was the end. What I didn't realize, it was the end of the when you can harass women, sexually harass women in the workplace. It was the end of that era, thank God. It was also the end of the newspapering business, which is super sad. It was the end of the media business when media was not just for, I get the sense that media is for people who can afford it now, who can afford to make no money, but it's sort of like for a certain kind of person. But at the time, a lot of different kinds of people were reporters. We had a very diverse newsroom. We had a very economically diverse newsroom. We had a very racially diverse newsroom. Many more men than women, but all kinds of people. And so it was the end of that era for newspapering. And it was kind of the end of a time when, like, now everyone's got a video camera and everyone's a YouTube star. And so the power of, so news has become something different. So it was the end of a certain kind of media. And I didn't realize that at the time, but it is a bit of a time capsule. So anyway, Jeremy decided to publish them again, and I couldn't be more proud and thrilled.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I do, what you're talking about, it really rings true. I mean, there, and by when you talk about like that being the end of an era, I almost feel like with every new thing that comes out, it's the end of an era, and it's so quick now. Um, I think having sort of you talk about it being like a time capsule, having somebody like Kate, who really is a journalist. She's, a crime reporter in the way that it was when there wasn't so much access. You really had to sort of sniff things out versus now where, even like when you're trying to write about something, there's a million people who are giving their hot takes on like Twitter, or it's X now, whatever it is, but on everything. And I think it's really important to sort of have these character driven stories where they're sort of solving a crime as by following certain things. But with the main characters, so when you how is Kate like you, and how is she kind of different from you from way back in the day?
Well, I was married by the time I started writing these books, so I was not as promiscuous as my character was because, like, hey, don't you want to read some hot sex in a book? I did. So I
Well,
wrote.
for sure, for sure, for sure. And I was gonna say, listen, like it's good to spice it up like that. So yes, thumbs up for
Yeah.
that.
So yes, so I was, and also it's a lot about ambition. And I think that like about women's unease with ambition. And I think that that can be a certain time in your life as if you're a young, ambitious woman. I think that there's a time when you feel really insecure about that. And that really changed for me over time. But I think at the time I was like trying to figure out how are you ambitious and also have a personal life, and the tensions between a human eating job, like a job that would not stay in a 9 to 5, would not stay in a 14-hour a day box. It was just all consuming. And then what do you do when you actually want to have a life, like that tension, which I think a lot of people still go through. but I'm not going through it now. I've learned I have a different kind of life. So I think that character was like me in that way, but not like me now. It's a little bit, having this book reissued is a little bit like meeting myself from 27 years ago, which has just been such a joy, such a thrill to say, yes, I was all those things. Yes, I thought all those things. I was super rude and super abrupt, and I just thought the things that I was seeing were amazing and hilarious, and could really see the humor in it. Like, the book is funny, and it's also really tragic, and it's also really sexy. So they set out to do something pretty ambitious in the confines of a genre, crime fiction genre, and I like what I did.
How do you read a lot of crime fiction drama still?
No, I gotta
No.
say, I gotta say I don't. And I find it hard to watch television shows about crime stuff because I covered it for so long that I'm like, yeah, no, that wouldn't happen. It's just like it wouldn't happen, right? And also, I kind of view violence differently now. We have such a violent culture now. We have such pervasive use of illegal handguns, and we have so much crime happening. Okay, crime is low, but we have a lot of these like super violent incidents, mass shootings that rip through the fabric of our lives. And I'm just not interested in narratives that have to do with a gun at this point. I'm not debating the Second Amendment or anything, but I'm just saying that like I want a different kind of narrative now in my life. I'm I look at I'm sort of traumatized, as we all are as a culture, by mass shootings, and I don't want to glorify that, and I don't want to watch that, so I don't want to read about that.
No, that makes absolute sense. I do find it very interesting that true crime in general has become extremely popular as a genre in and of itself, which I think is another one of those things, because now you have people making podcasts where they're trying to point fingers at people and they don't know what's going on. Whole other
And
story
a lot of
altogether.
them are, listen, a lot of them are well-meaning, but they're not resourced reporters, and they don't actually know what they're doing. And so a lot of times I will listen to that and I'll be like, oh man, can I get my 20 minutes back? Like, this person like has no, listen, hats off to them that they're trying to do something, I get the impulse, right? But they don't know what they're doing. And so it seems really, it seems like, rookie time in a way. And I get frustrated with it. I was fortunate to work in the news business for a long time, and we had we really refined our skills, and we didn't fall. You just see people falling into the same kind of traps, being, weirdly being, othering people who commit crimes and lionizing the police. And none of those things are really true. Like, people who commit crimes, often they're just like you and me. No, they have, they're not human, right? They're just human beings who've who've taken a different turn. And law enforcement, some of the members of, just like journalists, some of the journalists I know I love and would make godfathers of my children, and some I wouldn't give my home address to. And I feel the same way about law enforcement. Like, some of the people I've met in law enforcement are the most extraordinary stand-up human beings I have ever met outside the priesthood. And some of them, again, I wouldn't give my home address to. So I have a nuanced view of it.
So talking about the characters of Dominic and John Finn, they are definitely very interesting characters to read. I mean, I think like you said, it's also a very funny book and it's a very sexy book. Were they sort of amalgams of people you knew back then, or not? And do you think, like, was it interesting reading them again now? Like you had said that reading Kate was like meeting yourself 27 years ago. Did you kind of look at John and Dominic differently through your lens now?
Well, a funny thing happened, in that time, I was working this crazy job, and everything that ran across my desk, everything I saw, everything I said, everything that was said to me was all like just got encoded in some part of my brain to feel to like become part of this narrative. And when the books came out, a lot of people said to me like, "Girl, like that was me," and I was like, "Oh God, it so wasn't you." Like maybe one thing that you said to me is in that character, but they're total amalgams. So some people got really weird around me, and they were like, "I didn't know you felt that way about me," and other people were like, and other people were like, "Bitch, how come you're so mean?" Right? And I was like, "Oh, it wasn't. You have to appreciate that being a journalist is not the same as being a novelist." Okay, like I wasn't trying to chronicle people. I was just creating characters and using everything that I possibly could, throwing everything into it. And thank you for saying that the books are funny and sexy too. I appreciate that.
You know, another thing you were talking about, and I feel like this ties into Kate's situation. Kate is, she's, as we mentioned, she's sort of fallen to a rough place. She's put on probation because of a mistake. Um, do you, this is going to sound ridiculous, or maybe it
Go
won't.
ahead, fire away.
I feel like, how do you look at sort of Kate's situation back then versus situations now, where it's almost like you sometimes kind of wonder where the consequences are if somebody misreports something very publicly? Like, it doesn't feel necessarily like they are held as accountable as they might have been a while back.
Yeah, the media business has really changed. I'm out. I'm pretty much out of it now. I write features sometimes for the Times and the Atlantic, and like big pieces, big, long pieces I spend a year on, but that's a luxury. Okay. So if you're a field reporter, and there's not that many left, you have to appreciate what a rough job it is. You are hanging by a thread all the time, and people can mislead you, and people can purposely mislead you. Some people have the job of misleading journalists, and you're just like, you're just so easily manipulated. And also, it's so easy for things to fall through the cracks. I love it when people say, like, "Oh, that person didn't tell the truth." Okay, like, okay, what is truth? Like, we're just trying to chronicle history, and I think more and more as this news cycle has sped up, there's less time for reflection, there's less time for checking. People tweet something and then everyone's like, "It's true, but they tweeted it." It's like, really? Did they? Right? And they don't even quote the actual tweet, right? They don't even forget where it came from. So yeah. So I feel for our journalists now. I think the business has really changed. The model is based on traffic and not on advertising. So all media organizations are just trying to manufacture outrage, and they're retailing outrage to you so that your eyes stay glued to their websites. And it's just a terrible model, and it's just so demoralizing and terrible for our democracy, in my view.
So, would you write another fiction novel at this point? Would you, now
Oh,
that you've kind of come back to publishing these, actually, is your second novel going to
yeah,
be?
the sequel to this is coming out also, so that in a year, so that's just thrilling. uh you know Yeah, I might. I'm thinking about another project. I write nonfiction books now. I'm thinking about another project now about gifted people who are gifted, so-called gifted. And I've been thinking about that a lot. It's hard to write a book. I have a day job. I run a foundation, and I have a day job. So that's complicated to find the time. But yeah, I could do it. I could do it. I'd like to do it.
That's actually a really interesting topic because I've been hearing on the internet, I've been hearing a lot of people talking just about it in general.
Really.
Yeah, no, for sure. Just the idea of, because I was a child. I was a child in the 80s and, early 90s, and a teenager in the 90s. And I remember there was this big, there were a lot of this big surge of, people who were gifted. And I'm hearing a lot of people now kind of talk about like revisiting, the people who were considered gifted, revisiting that sort of thing in their life. And having various opinions on what that meant to them and how that's affected them now. So I think that would actually be a really interesting
That
topic.
is exactly the project that I'm thinking about doing. And part of me wants to do it as a book, and part of me wants to do it audio, for audio. Did a stint as a television reporter for 3 years, and I did a little radio, so I know a bit of audio. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see where it goes.
But you wouldn't revisit Kate's character at
I
this
would
point.
love to. I would love to, especially doing like an old broads version of it, like having a little mileage on you, caring less about what people think, having, I think it was that soccer player, Rapinoe. What was her first name?
Megan
Mary,
Rapinoe, who is
Megan, Megan
engaged.
Rapinoe, who I
Yeah,
think
she's engaged to somebody I went to high school with, Sue
who
Bird.
famously said,
Yeah,
"I'm just all out of fucks," and it's just
yeah,
like,
yeah, 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 yeah.
like coming from that perspective, I think for this character would be great. The thing is, there's no old broads in media. Like, it's now a business where you don't get old; you just get drummed out, and so that would be challenging to figure out what her positionality in the world. But yeah, it would be great. It'd be
For
great.
sure. And, especially I think because we were talking about, to have like a character, like Kate kind of, or having Kate herself sort of like post Me Too, I think would be
Great, right? So
right.
great. Yeah, so much fun. I'm just so thrilled. As I said, I'm just so proud of our young women and how they stood up. Listen, I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge proponent of due process as the cornerstone of our judicial freedom. And that said, I'm super proud of our young women. Like, right on, girls. Like, good job. Uh, it was a really unexpected phenomenon. It came on fast and it changed the world, and I'm really, really proud of them.
So how do you find writing, or I mean, it's been a while, but how do you find writing fiction different, in long form different than nonfiction, like your nonfiction books versus
Fiction
fiction?
is so much harder. Fiction is so much harder because nonfiction, you're just writing the stuff. You learn stuff and then you write it in a way that people might want to read. Fiction is like having, I think Ann Patchett said, it's like having a bathtub running in your house. Like, you turn on the bath and you always kind of know what the water level is, and like even though you're doing something else, you always kind of know what the water level is. It's always on your mind. It's like a creature that inhabits you. It's a parasite. It's terrible. It's a nightmare. Don't ever do it, but it's great. It's wonderful. It's like the worst, best thing you can do.
Did the I mean, did like the so did you within the time period, did you want to write fiction, or were you just kind of like, listen, I've got to put this parasite to bed or I'm never going to get anything else done?
No, I had to. I was super compelled to do it. I was just like, I was just really traumatized. Also, my husband's a novelist, so it's not like he was like, "Hey, let's just sit around and talk." He was like working, and he's got amazing work habits. So I was a little defensive in a way. It was like, okay, we're gonna work on our thing, and then yeah, it was kind of the way that we lived together. Very, very highly productive.
Very cool. Well, this is once again, so Strangers in the Night has been reissued. Is it out yet, the reissue?
It's been reissued, yeah, and my last name is Tyre, Tyre, if you want to get it at your library,
Which you
or
should.
which you should definitely. I'm a
Which you
giant
should.
library fan, yes.
And
And
what
if
are
you
some
don't have a library card, get one. And if you don't
absolutely.
use your library, go to the library because there's so much cool stuff happening there. I just want to say, giant library fan.
Thank you so much. So am me. So am I.
I hope
I
so.
am a giant library fan as well. And then are your nonfiction books still in print? And what are they? What
Yes,
are
I have a book called 2 Seconds Under the World. I don't think that's in print. That was about the first World Trade Center bombing, which I wrote with a couple of other reporters. I wrote a book called Trouble with Boys, which is about boys and education and how education is poorly suited. Schools are poorly suited for boys. And I wrote a book called The Good School, which is again an education book. And those are all in print still.
very cool. Well, definitely, like I said, check out Strangers in the Night. It is a great crime story and it is funny and sexy and will kind of take you back. It's so funny with like it's been a while since Mad Men ended. But I, remember, and that was before, obviously, that's predates Strangers in the Night. But I remember, sitting there and watching that with my grandmother, and she's watching how the guys are treating all the women in the office, and she's just like, "Oh yeah, yeah," So more power to people who've moved on from that. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I'd love to see Kate post Me Too as well.
Oh, that's so lovely. Thank you so much for saying that. And thanks for the interview.
You're welcome. Thanks for sitting down with me. So once again, this was Jessica with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast. My guest today was Peg Tyre, like the car wheel. And we are not reinventing the wheel, but we are reissuing Strangers in the Night 27 years later. And your second one is The Midnight Hour, right?
Midnight Hour, yep.
Very, very cool. And what's the company that reissued them again?
Dead Sky Publishing. It's a small publishing house out of Chicago.
Fabulous. We are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.